The auctioneer's voice cracked through the hot afternoon air like a whip, and Eleanor Shaw felt her stomach twist as she stood on the raised platform in the center of Vinetka's dusty square, her hands trembling at her sides, while every eye in the crowd bore into her with either pity or contempt. She had never imagined her life would come to this, standing like livestock, while her stepmother Constance counted bills in the shade, her painted lips curved in satisfaction as men called out numbers that would determine Eleanor's fate. The year was 1878, and California's small frontier towns still operated under their own brutal codes, where a desperate widow could sell her stepdaughter's labor contract to settle debts without anyone raising more than an eyebrow. Eleanor's father had died 6 months earlier in a mining accident, and within weeks Constance had burned through what little money he had left, spending it on silk dresses and imported perfume, while Eleanor worked her fingers raw, trying to keep their small ranch running. When the creditors came knocking, Constance had smiled that cold smile and told Eleanor she had found a solution, leading her into town with promises of meeting a potential employer. The truth had hit Eleanor like a fist when Constance handed the auctioneer a stack of papers declaring Eleanor's indenture available for purchase. $25, someone called from the back of the crowd, and Eleanor's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. 30, another voice countered, belonging to a silver-haired man whose eyes made Eleanor's skin crawl. She scanned the crowd desperately, searching for anyone she recognized who might help. But the townspeople simply watched with the detached interest of spectators at a horse sale. The May sun beat down mercilessly on her dark hair, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath the plain cotton dress that had once belonged to her mother. At 19 years old, Eleanor had expected her life to unfold differently, perhaps meeting a kind man at a church social or taking a teaching position at the new schoolhouse. Instead, she stood on an auction block while strangers decided her worth. $40, the silver-haired man called again, stepping closer. Eleanor recognized him now as Marcus Grayson, owner of the largest saloon in town, a man whose employees often sported bruises they tried to hide. The auctioneer raised his gavel, preparing to close the bidding, when a new voice rang out clear and strong. $200. The crowd gasped and turned as one, Eleanor included, searching for whoever had spoken. A tall man pushed through the gathered bodies, his worn hat shadowing his face until he reached the front. When he looked up at Eleanor, she found herself staring into the most striking hazel eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-weathered face that might have been carved from the Sierra Nevada mountains themselves. He could not have been much older than 24 or 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a jaw that looked like it rarely smiled. "Did you say $200, young man?" the auctioneer asked, clearly shocked. "Yes, sir. $200 cash for Miss Shaw's freedom papers, not her labor. I am buying out the contract entirely, then destroying it." The stranger's voice carried across the square with absolute certainty. Marcus Grayson's face purpled with rage. "That is not how this works. The contract is for 7 years of labor." "The law says a contract can be bought out at fair market value," the stranger replied calmly, pulling a worn leather wallet from his vest pocket. "I worked 3 years on a cattle drive to save this money, and I cannot think of a better way to spend it. Now, do you want my cash or not?" The auctioneer looked at Constance, who had emerged from the shade, her calculating eyes fixed on the stranger's wallet. "The girl's stepmother holds the contract. The decision is hers." Constance's gaze flickered between Marcus Grayson and the stranger, weighing her options. Eleanor knew that look. Her stepmother was adding up numbers, determining which option benefited her most. $200 was an enormous sum, more than Marcus had offered, and it would be paid immediately, rather than in installments as the labor contracts typically were. "I accept the gentleman's offer," Constance announced, extending her hand. The stranger counted out the bills with methodical precision, his expression never changing even as he handed over what must have been every cent he owned. When the money changed hands, he turned to the auctioneer and said, "I need those papers right now." The auctioneer fumbled with the documents, passing them over. Without hesitation, The stranger tore the contract into pieces, letting the fragments scatter in the dusty breeze. Eleanor watched the papers fall, unable to process what had just happened. Freedom. This man had just bought her freedom. "You can step down now, Miss Shaw," the stranger said quietly, offering his hand to help her from the platform. Eleanor took it, her legs shaking so badly she nearly stumbled. His grip was strong and steady, calloused from hard work, but surprisingly gentle. When her feet touched solid ground, she looked up at him, words failing her completely. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not even know your name." "Isaac Matthews, madam. I have a small ranch about 5 miles west of here. Not much, but it is honest work." He released her hand and stepped back, as if suddenly aware he was still holding it. "You are free to go wherever you want now. I just could not stand by and watch you be sold to a man like Grayson." Eleanor glanced over her shoulder to see Marcus Grayson glaring at them both, and Constance already walking away with her newly acquired fortune, not even sparing Eleanor a backward glance. The other townspeople were dispersing now that the entertainment had ended, leaving Eleanor standing in the square with her unlikely savior and no idea what to do next. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted, hating how small her voice sounded. "My stepmother will not let me back in the house, not now that she has her money. And I have nothing, not even a change of clothes." Isaac Matthews studied her for a long moment, his hazel eyes thoughtful. "I have a housekeeper position open, if you are interested. My mother passed last winter, and the place has been falling apart without a woman's touch. The pay is fair, you would have your own room, and I give you my word I would never lay a hand on you improperly." Eleanor searched his face for any sign of deception, but found only earnest sincerity. What choice did she have? Sleep in the street, or accept help from the man who had just spent his life savings to save her from a terrible fate? "I accept your offer, Mr. Matthews, and I will work hard to help you earn back what you spent today." He shook his head. "That money was mine to spend how I chose. You do not owe me anything except honest work for honest pay. Now, let me get my horse and wagon. We should leave before Grayson decides to make trouble." 20 minutes later, Eleanor sat on the bench of a weathered wagon beside Isaac Matthews as they rolled out of Winnetka, heading west into the Golden Hills. She clutched her few possessions in a small cloth bundle Constance had grudgingly allowed her to retrieve: her mother's silver locket, a worn Bible, and one change of undergarments. Everything else she had ever owned now belonged to her stepmother. They rode in silence for the first mile, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves. Eleanor studied Isaac from the corner of her eye, trying to understand what kind of man would sacrifice everything for a stranger. His profile was strong, with a straight nose and a firm mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, his capable hands loose on the reins. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. Isaac was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "My mother was sold by her family when she was 16. Irish immigrant, and her father could not feed all his children, so he indentured her to a factory owner in San Francisco. She worked 12 hours a day in conditions that would make a prison look comfortable. She was 21 before she could buy her own freedom, and by then her health was ruined. She met my father when he came to the city to sell cattle, and he brought her out here where she could breathe clean air and see the sky. She had 15 good years before the consumption took her." He paused, his jaw tightening. "She made me promise before she died that if I ever saw someone being sold like she was, I would help them if I could. I have been saving money for 3 years, planning to expand my herd. But when I rode into town today and saw you standing there, looking so scared but trying so hard to be brave, I heard my mother's voice in my head. The cattle can wait." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were not born of despair. "Your mother raised a good son, Mr. Matthews. Isaac, please." If we are going to be living under the same roof, we might as well use first names. And my mother would have liked you, I think. She always said you could tell a person's character by their eyes, and yours are kind. Eleanor, she offered in return, and I hope I can live up to your mother's memory. I promise I will take good care of your home. The ranch came into view as they crested a hill, and Eleanor felt her breath catch. It was not a grand estate, but something about the sight of it made her chest tighten with unexpected emotion. A simple wooden house with a covered porch sat nestled against a grove of oak trees, with a barn and several outbuildings scattered around it. Horses grazed in a fenced pasture, and beyond that, rolling hills stretched toward the distant mountains. After months of living under Constance's suffocating control, this place looked like paradise. Isaac pulled the wagon up to the house and jumped down, then came around to help Eleanor descend. His hands circled her waist briefly as he lifted her to the ground, and she felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach at the contact. She pushed the feeling away, reminding herself that Isaac had bought her freedom out of honor and memory, nothing more. "It is not much," Isaac said, sounding almost apologetic as he led her up the porch steps. "And I am afraid the inside is pretty rough. I have been doing my own cooking and cleaning, which is to say things have been mostly neither cooked nor cleaned properly." He opened the door, and Eleanor stepped into a main room that served as kitchen and sitting area combined. Dishes were stacked in a wash basin. Dust covered every surface, and the stone fireplace looked like it had not been properly swept in months. But the bones of the house were good, with sturdy furniture and windows that let in plenty of light. Eleanor could see the potential beneath the neglect. "I have seen much worse," she assured him. "Give me a few days, and I will have this place looking like your mother kept it." Isaac showed her through the rest of the house. Besides the main room, there were 3 bedrooms, a small pantry, and a back porch where water could be pumped from a well. He carried her bundle to the smallest bedroom, which had a window overlooking the oak grove and a simple iron bed frame with a thin mattress. "I will bring in some fresh linens from the chest in my mother's room," he said. "And there are some of her dresses in there, too. You are about the same height she was. Please take whatever you need. She would want her things to be useful rather than sitting in a trunk gathering dust." The gesture made Eleanor's throat tight. "Thank you, Isaac, for everything." He nodded and backed toward the door, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I will be out working the horses if you need anything. There is food in the pantry. Help yourself to whatever you want. We can discuss wages and duties properly at supper." After he left, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to process the events of the day. This morning she had woken in her childhood home, believing she was going to meet a potential employer. Now she was sitting in a stranger's house 5 miles from town, with nothing to her name but the clothes on her back and a man's improbable kindness standing between her and destitution. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something that might have been hope. Eleanor spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the house and beginning to set it to rights. She found Isaac's mother's trunk and carefully opened it, revealing neatly folded dresses in practical fabrics, an extra pair of boots, and various personal items that spoke of a woman who had valued simplicity and function over frivolity. Eleanor selected a calico work dress in a soft blue that fit reasonably well, then set about heating water for washing. By the time the sun began its descent toward the horizon, she had cleaned the main room, washed all the dishes, and started a stew with vegetables from the pantry and salt pork from the cold cellar. She was stirring the pot when Isaac came in, smelling of horses and honest sweat, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He stopped in the doorway, staring around the transformed room with obvious surprise. "You have been busy. I told you I would work hard." Eleanor ladled stew into 2 bowls and set them on the now clean table. "It is not fancy, but it should be edible." They sat across from each other, and for a few minutes the only sound was the clinking of spoons against bowls. Eleanor snuck glances at Isaac between bites, noticing the way his hair curled damply at his temples and the faint lines around his eyes that suggested he spent most of his time squinting into the sun. He ate with the focused intensity of a man who usually viewed meals as fuel rather than pleasure. "This is the best thing I have eaten in months," he said finally, looking up at her with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "You are a good cook." "My mother taught me before she died. I was 12 when the fever took her. My father remarried 2 years later, thinking Constance would be a good mother to me." Eleanor's voice hardened. "He was very wrong about that." Isaac set down his spoon. "What will she do now, do you think? Your stepmother?" "Spend the money you gave her as fast as she can, most likely. She will buy new dresses and attend every social event in 3 counties, pretending to be a respectable widow. When the money runs out, she will find some other man to support her." Eleanor shrugged, trying to appear indifferent, even though the betrayal still burned. "I hope I never have to see her again." "You will not if you stay here, and you are welcome to stay as long as you like." Isaac paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I know this situation is strange. We are strangers living under the same roof, but I want you to know that you are safe here. My mother raised me to respect women, and I take that responsibility seriously. Your room has a lock on the door if that makes you feel better." Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest. "I believe you, Isaac. I do not know why, but I do. Maybe it is because anyone willing to give up their life savings for a stranger's freedom probably has a good heart. Or is just foolish with money," he said, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. They finished their meal in companionable silence, and Eleanor insisted on cleaning up while Isaac went to check on the horses one final time. By the time he returned, she had banked the fire and was standing on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I never get tired of that view," Isaac said, joining her. "On the cattle drives, we would sleep under stars like these every night. It made me feel small, but also like I was part of something bigger, you know?" Eleanor nodded. "I used to sleep on the porch at my father's ranch during the summer. I would count stars until I fell asleep. Constance made me stop after she married my father, said it was not ladylike. You can sleep on the porch here anytime you want," Isaac offered. "Though the coyotes might sing you some strange lullabies." Eleanor laughed, surprising herself. When was the last time she had laughed? "I think I can handle coyotes." They stood together in the gathering darkness, not quite touching, but somehow sharing the space in a way that felt natural. Eleanor realized she was no longer afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Whatever happened, it would be better than what she had left behind in Winnetka. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Eleanor woke before dawn to start breakfast, then spent her days cleaning, cooking, mending, and gradually bringing order to the neglected homestead. Isaac worked from sunrise to sunset with the horses, breaking and training them for sale to ranchers and the occasional cavalry buyer. In the evenings, they would share a meal and talk about their days, slowly learning each other's stories and quirks. Eleanor discovered that Isaac had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was relaxed, and that he was terrified of spiders despite facing down half-wild horses without flinching. He learned that Eleanor could shoot better than most men, her father having taught her before Constance put a stop to such unladylike activities, and that she had a beautiful singing voice she only used when she thought she was alone. One evening in early June, Eleanor was in the garden she had started planting when Isaac rode up on his favorite horse, a bay gelding named Copper. He swung down from the saddle with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on foot. "I need to ride into Winnetka tomorrow for supplies," he said, pulling off his gloves. "I thought you might want to come along, maybe pick out some fabric for new dresses. You have been wearing my mother's clothes for weeks now." Eleanor sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. "I do not mind her dresses. They are comfortable for working." "I know, but you should have things that are yours. Besides, I thought you might want to see if anyone has news from town." He paused, then added carefully, "There is a letter waiting for you at the general store. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it when I was there last week. Eleanor's heart skipped. A letter? Who would write to me? I do not know. Mrs. Henderson just said it came through about 10 days ago, addressed to Eleanor Shaw, care of Isaac Matthews. Someone must have heard you are staying here. The next morning, they set out early to beat the heat. Eleanor wore one of her nicer borrowed dresses, a green cotton that brought out the amber flecks in her brown eyes. She had pinned up her dark hair and let a few tendrils curl around her face, not because she was trying to impress anyone, she told herself, but simply because it felt good to look presentable again. Isaac had dressed more carefully than usual, too, she noticed, wearing a clean shirt and a vest she had not seen before. His hair was still damp from washing, and he smelled faintly of soap and leather. When he helped her into the wagon, his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, and Eleanor felt that flutter in her stomach again, stronger this time. The ride into Winnetka took just over an hour, and Eleanor found herself growing increasingly nervous as they approached the town. She hadn't been back since the auction, and the thought of seeing Constance or facing the people who had watched her humiliation made her stomach churn. Isaac seemed to sense her discomfort. We will get what we need and leave quickly, and if anyone gives you trouble, they will answer to me. His protective tone made Eleanor feel braver. She squared her shoulders as they rolled down Main Street, ready to face whatever awaited her. The general store was busy with morning shoppers, and Eleanor felt multiple pairs of eyes turn toward her when she walked in with Isaac. Conversations quieted, then resumed in urgent whispers. Eleanor kept her head high and walked directly to the counter where Mrs. Henderson, a plump woman with kind eyes, was measuring out flour. "Miss Shaw, how good to see you," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "You are looking well. Ranch life must agree with you." "It does, thank you. I understand there is a letter for me." Mrs. Henderson retrieved an envelope from beneath the counter and passed it over. Eleanor recognized the handwriting immediately. Her Aunt Margaret, her father's sister who lived in Sacramento. Eleanor had written to her weeks ago before the auction, desperately seeking help that had not arrived in time. She opened the letter with shaking hands, aware of Isaac standing close beside her, a solid presence at her back. The letter was brief but devastating. Aunt Margaret had been traveling when Eleanor's first letter arrived and had only just returned to find it waiting. She was horrified to learn of Constance's actions and wanted Eleanor to come to Sacramento immediately. She had a large house, no children of her own, and would be honored to have Eleanor live with her. She even mentioned knowing of several eligible young men who would make fine husbands for a girl of good family. Eleanor read the letter twice, her mind reeling. Sacramento represented everything she had hoped for during those dark weeks with Constance: family, security, respectability, and the chance for a normal life. Aunt Margaret was wealthy and well-connected. Living with her, Eleanor could have pretty dresses, attend parties, and meet educated men who courted with flowers and poetry. But the thought of leaving the ranch, leaving Isaac, made her chest ache in a way she had not expected. "Is it bad news?" Isaac asked quietly. Eleanor looked up at him, taking in his concerned hazel eyes and the small crease between his brows. "No, not bad. My aunt wants me to come live with her in Sacramento. She only just found out what happened." Something flickered across Isaac's face, too quick to identify. "That is wonderful. Sacramento is a fine city. You would have opportunities there, a real future." "Yes," Eleanor said slowly. "I suppose I would." They finished their shopping in near silence, Isaac selecting supplies while Eleanor chose fabric with Mrs. Henderson's help, though her heart was not in it. Other townspeople approached to speak with them, some expressing shock at what Constance had done, others admitting they had felt helpless to intervene. Marcus Grayson watched from across the street, his expression sour, but he made no move to approach. On the ride home, Isaac kept his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "When will you leave for Sacramento?" he finally asked. "I have not decided if I am going," Eleanor replied. That made him turn to look at her. "Of course you are going. It is a chance for a real life, Eleanor. You cannot pass that up to stay on a dusty ranch playing housekeeper to a horse rancher. His words stung, though she knew he meant them kindly. Is that all I am? Your housekeeper? Isaac pulled the wagon to a stop in the middle of the road. They were alone on the empty stretch between Winnetka and the ranch, with nothing around them but rolling hills and blue sky. He turned to face her fully. No, he said, his voice rough. No, you are not just my housekeeper. These past weeks, having you at the ranch, it has been the best time I can remember since my mother died. You have made that house into a home again. You have made me remember how to smile. And I look forward to coming in from work every evening because I know you will be there, ready to tell me about your day or laugh at my terrible jokes or just sit quietly on the porch watching the stars. But that does not matter because I have nothing to offer you, Eleanor. I am a simple horse rancher with a modest spread and barely enough money to expand. You deserve silk dresses and city life and a man who can give you the world. Eleanor stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. What if I do not want silk dresses and city life? What if I want oak trees and horses and terrible jokes? What if the past few weeks have been the happiest I can remember too? Isaac's eyes searched her face. Eleanor, you cannot make a decision like this based on a few weeks of gratitude. You think you owe me something because I bought out your contract, but you do not. You are free to choose whatever life you want. I know I am free, Eleanor said, her voice stronger now. That is exactly why I can choose. And maybe I am choosing you, Isaac Matthews, if you want me to. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the space between them charged with possibility. Then Isaac reached out and cupped her face with his rough hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. I have wanted you to stay since the first day I brought you home, he admitted. But I did not know how to say it without making you feel obligated. Eleanor, if you choose to stay, it would be the greatest gift you could give me, but only if it is truly what you want. It is, Eleanor whispered. I want to stay. Isaac leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she did not, his lips met hers in a kiss that was sweet and careful and full of promise. Eleanor's eyes fluttered closed as she kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, where she could feel his heart racing as fast as her own. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I will do everything in my power to make you happy, Eleanor Shaw. That is my promise to you. You already have, she told him. You gave me my freedom and showed me what kindness looks like. Everything else is just a wonderful addition. They drove the rest of the way home hand in hand, Eleanor's letter to Aunt Margaret already being composed in her mind. She would explain that she had found a good life in California with a good man, and while she appreciated the offer immensely, she was choosing to stay where her heart had unexpectedly found a home. Summer deepened across the California hills, painting everything gold and green. Eleanor's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for their table. Isaac's horse business grew as word spread about the quality of his training, and their relationship bloomed like the wildflowers that dotted the meadows, growing stronger and more beautiful with each passing day. They courted properly, despite living under the same roof. Isaac brought Eleanor wildflowers and took her riding through the hills on Sunday afternoons. Eleanor packed special picnics and wore her new dresses that she had sewn from the fabric they bought in town. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's dreams and fears and hopes for the future. One evening in late July, Isaac came in from working and found Eleanor in the kitchen, her hair pinned up and her face flushed from the heat of cooking. Something about the domestic scene, the way the evening light caught in her hair, and the contented look on her face as she worked, made his heart clench with love so powerful it almost hurt. Eleanor, he said, and something in his tone made her turn from the stove. What is it? Is something wrong? No, everything is right. That is the problem. He crossed the room to her, taking both her hands in his. I know it has only been a few months, and maybe this is too soon, but I cannot wait any longer to ask. Eleanor Shaw, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise I will work every day to make you happy and give you the life you deserve. I may not be rich, but I can offer you a good home, honest work, and all the love in my heart. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling as she said, Yes, Isaac, yes, I will marry you. I do not need riches, I just need you. Isaac swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her with all the pent-up emotion he had been holding back for weeks, and Eleanor kissed him back with equal passion, her fingers tangling in his hair. We should get married soon, Isaac said when they finally broke apart. I do not want to wait. Is that too forward of me? Not at all. I do not want to wait either. Eleanor traced her fingers along his jaw, marveling that this strong, kind man wanted to spend his life with her. Let us go to Winnetka next Sunday and speak to the minister. They were married 3 weeks later on a perfect August morning, with wildflowers decorating the small church and half of Winnetka in attendance. Eleanor wore a cream-colored dress she had sewn herself with lace from the general store and pearl buttons Isaac had ordered specially from San Francisco. Isaac wore a new suit that made him look impossibly handsome, though he tugged at the collar and whispered to Eleanor that he could not wait to get back into comfortable clothes. Mrs. Henderson cried through the entire ceremony. Several of the men who had stood silent at Eleanor's auction made a point of congratulating Isaac on his bride and admitting they were ashamed they had not spoken up that day. Marcus Grayson was notably absent, having left Winnetka under mysterious circumstances that no one wanted to discuss in detail. Constance did not attend, which suited Eleanor perfectly. She had learned through town gossip that her stepmother had indeed burned through Isaac's $200 in spectacular fashion, then latched onto a traveling merchant who promised her a life in San Francisco. Eleanor had written one final letter to Constance, formally severing all ties and making it clear she wanted no further contact. It had been remarkably freeing to seal that envelope and send it away. The wedding celebration lasted well into the afternoon, with food and music provided by generous neighbors. Eleanor danced with Isaac under the oak trees, his arms strong around her waist, and thought about how strange life was. 4 months ago, she had stood on an auction block, believing her life was over. Now she was married to the man she loved, surrounded by a community that had come to accept and respect her, embarking on a future full of possibility. That night, in the bedroom they now shared, Isaac was tender and patient, making sure Eleanor felt cherished and safe. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight, Eleanor traced idle patterns on his chest and marveled at how completely her life had changed. What are you thinking? Isaac asked, his fingers combing through her unbound hair. That I am the luckiest woman in California, maybe in all of America. I am the lucky one, he insisted. You could have gone to Sacramento and married some rich banker, but you chose a simple rancher instead. Eleanor propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. You are not simple, Isaac Matthews. You are extraordinary. You saw someone in trouble and helped without expecting anything in return. You work hard and treat people fairly. You made me feel safe when I had every reason to be afraid. That is not simple, that is heroic. Isaac pulled her down for a long, sweet kiss. I love you, Eleanor Matthews. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Impossible, Eleanor murmured against his lips, because I already know I never will. The seasons turned, bringing autumn gold and winter rains to the California hills. Eleanor and Isaac worked side by side to build their life together. She helped him with the horses, proving to have a natural gift for gentling even the most skittish animals. He helped her expand the garden and build a proper chicken coop. Together they painted the house, repaired the barn, and slowly transformed the modest ranch into something that felt permanent and prosperous. In the spring, Eleanor discovered she was expecting a child. Isaac was so overcome with joy that he picked her up and spun her around just as he had when she accepted his proposal, not putting her down until she was dizzy with laughter and demanding he stop before she got sick. A baby, he kept saying, his hand splayed protectively over her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby. Yes, we are. Are you ready to be a father? I am terrified, he admitted, but also more excited than I have ever been. Our child, Eleanor, a little person who is half you and half me. Their son was born in January of 1880 during a rare cold snap that frosted the hills white. The labor was long and difficult, and Isaac wore a path in the floor of the main room while the midwife worked with Eleanor. When he finally heard his son's first cry, he burst into the bedroom despite the midwife's protests, desperate to see his wife and child. Eleanor looked exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt Isaac's mother had made years ago. Come meet your son, she said softly. Isaac approached the bed with trembling hands, staring down at the impossibly small face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably be hazel like his father's. As Isaac watched, the baby yawned and made a small fist, and Isaac felt his heart expand to a size he had not known was possible. He is perfect, Isaac breathed. Eleanor, you are amazing. Look what you did. We did, Eleanor corrected. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months, going through family trees and books and favorite historical figures. But looking at his son now, Isaac knew exactly what felt right. What about James, after your father? Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes. Are you sure? I thought you wanted to use your father's name. James Isaac Matthews, Isaac said firmly. We will honor both our fathers. Is that all right? It is perfect, Eleanor whispered. Hello, James. Welcome to the family. Young James proved to be a healthy, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed fascinated by the horses from the moment Isaac first carried him out to the barn. Eleanor divided her time between caring for their son and managing the household, while Isaac continued building the ranch into one of the most respected horse operations in the county. When James was 6 months old, Eleanor received another letter from Aunt Margaret. Her aunt had heard of the marriage and the baby through mutual acquaintances, and she wrote to express her happiness that Eleanor had found a good life. She enclosed a generous check as a wedding gift, along with an open invitation for Eleanor and her family to visit Sacramento whenever they wished. We should go, Isaac said when Eleanor showed him the letter. I would like to meet your aunt, and James should know his family. They made the trip in early summer, traveling by stagecoach to Sacramento with James sleeping peacefully in Eleanor's arms. Aunt Margaret welcomed them with open arms, delighted to finally meet her niece's husband and great-nephew. She threw a dinner party in their honor, inviting half of Sacramento society, and Eleanor found herself enjoying the elegant affair far more than she expected. But as the evening wore on, and she smiled through yet another conversation with yet another wealthy stranger, Eleanor caught Isaac's eye across the room. He was standing somewhat awkwardly near the punch bowl, clearly uncomfortable in formal clothes and fancy surroundings. When he saw her looking, he gave her a small smile and a slight shrug that said clearer than words, "This is nice, but I cannot wait to go home." Eleanor felt exactly the same way. Sacramento was beautiful, and Aunt Margaret was wonderful, but it was not home. Home was a ranch house under oak trees, with horses in the pasture and a vegetable garden by the porch. Home was waking up next to Isaac and watching the sunrise paint the hills gold. They returned to the ranch after a week, and Eleanor actually sighed with relief when the familiar house came into view. Isaac looked over at her and grinned. City life not for you, Mrs. Matthews? Not even a little bit, Mr. Matthews. Take me home. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by small triumphs and occasional challenges. There was the year of drought, when the grass turned brown, and they had to sell half the herd to afford feed for the remaining horses. Isaac worked himself nearly to exhaustion, rising before dawn and collapsing into bed long after dark, but Eleanor worked beside him, and somehow they survived. There was the winter when James caught pneumonia, and they spent 3 terrifying weeks nursing him through fever and cough, taking turns sitting up with him through the long nights. When the fever finally broke and James's eyes cleared, Eleanor and Isaac held each other and cried with relief. There were good times, too. The spring when Isaac's horses won top prizes at the county fair, bringing recognition and new buyers. The summer when they added a new room onto the house. The countless evenings spent on the porch, watching James play in the yard while they sat hand in hand, content in their companionship. When James was 4 years old, Eleanor became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the labor was shorter, though no less intense. Their second child was a daughter born in October with her mother's brown eyes and her father's stubborn chin. What about Emily? Isaac suggested, cradling his daughter with the confidence of an experienced father. I always liked that name. Emily Margaret Matthews, Eleanor said. After your mother and my aunt. Perfect, Isaac agreed. Emily was as different from James as night from day. Where he had been calm and observant, she was energetic and vocal, making her opinions known from the moment she could gurgle. James adored his little sister, appointing himself her protector and bringing her flowers and interesting rocks from the moment she was old enough to appreciate them. The ranch continued to prosper. Isaac's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout California and into neighboring territories. He employed 2 ranch hands to help with the work, good men who treated Eleanor with respect and played with the children when they had spare time. Eleanor established herself as an important part of the community in her own right. She helped found a small school in Winnetka and served on the committee that oversaw its operation. She organized quilting bees and harvest celebrations. When new families moved to the area, Eleanor was often the first to welcome them with food and practical advice. No one ever mentioned the auction anymore. Eleanor had so completely established herself as Mrs. Isaac Matthews, respected wife and mother, that the circumstances of her arrival seemed like ancient history. Even Constance had faded into distant memory, occasionally appearing in town gossip, but never in person. One evening in the summer of 1886, when James was 6 and Emily 2, Isaac came in from the barn to find Eleanor in the kitchen garden, watching the children play while she shelled peas. The setting sun turned her hair to copper and highlighted the laugh lines around her eyes. At 27, she was even more beautiful than she had been at 19, matured and strengthened by the life they had built together. Isaac sat down beside her on the bench he had built for this exact purpose, stealing a handful of raw peas and earning himself a playful swat. I was thinking about something today. Something good or something worrying? Good, I think. I have been talking to the Hendersons about buying their property adjacent to ours. They want to move closer to their daughter in Los Angeles, and they offered us first chance at the land. It would nearly double our acreage. Eleanor looked at him thoughtfully. That is a big decision. Do we have the money? If we are careful, yes. The horse sales have been excellent this year, and we have savings. It would mean I could expand the breeding operation, maybe start raising cattle too. We could hire another hand or two, take on some of the workload. He paused, then added quietly, it would mean security for James and Emily, a real legacy to leave them. Then I think we should do it, Eleanor said. This ranch is our home, our family's future. Let us make it everything it can be. Isaac leaned over and kissed her, right there in the garden with their children playing nearby. Have I told you lately that you are remarkable? Not since this morning, Eleanor teased. But I never get tired of hearing it. They purchased the Henderson property that fall, and the expanded ranch brought new opportunities and challenges. Isaac threw himself into the work with renewed energy, Eleanor by his side every step of the way. They built new corrals and expanded the barn. They hired 3 ranch hands who lived in a newly constructed bunkhouse. The Matthews Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the county. As the years passed, Eleanor and Isaac's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course. Isaac could be stubborn about his methods, and Eleanor had strong opinions about how money should be spent. But they had learned early on to talk through their differences, to compromise and support each other, even when they did not agree. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Eleanor with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with a neighbor and spent 3 days in the city, staying in a nice hotel and dining in restaurants and attending the theater. It was wonderful and exciting, but Eleanor noticed that Isaac grew increasingly restless as the trip went on, just as she did. "We are hopeless country people now, are we not?" she said on their last evening, as they sat in their hotel room overlooking the bustling street below. "Completely hopeless," Isaac agreed. "I miss the kids. I miss the horses. I miss being able to see the stars at night. I miss our bed and our porch and the sound of wind through the oak trees." They looked at each other and laughed. "Let us go home early," they said in unison. They caught the morning stagecoach back to Winnetka, arriving home to squealing children and excited horses and everything familiar and beloved. That night, lying in their own bed with the window open to let in the summer breeze, Eleanor reflected on how perfectly imperfect their life was. "Do you ever wonder how things might have been different?" she asked Isaac. "If you had not been in town that day, or if you had not had the money to buy my freedom, or if I had gone to Sacramento?" Isaac pulled her closer against his side. "I try not to think about it because it makes me sick to imagine you with anyone else, but I suppose everything worked out the way it was meant to. My mother used to say that the universe has a plan even when we cannot see it. Your mother was a wise woman. I wish I could have known her." "She would have loved you," Isaac said softly. "She would have been so proud of the life we built, the family we made. Sometimes I feel like she is watching over us, making sure we are happy." Eleanor tilted her head up to kiss him. "We are happy, deeply, completely happy." Their third child was born in the spring of 1889, another boy they named Thomas after Isaac's father. With 3 children, the house was full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos of family life. James was turning into a serious, responsible boy who loved working with his father and the horses. Emily was bright and curious, constantly asking questions and getting into creative mischief. And baby Thomas was content and cuddly, happy to be passed from person to person, soaking up attention from everyone. Eleanor sometimes looked at her life and marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From the auction block to this, a house full of love and children, a husband who still made her heart race, and a place in a community that respected her. She had built this life from nothing, she and Isaac together, creating something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of her darkest day. The ranch continued to thrive through the 1890s. James grew into a capable young man who worked alongside his father, learning everything Isaac could teach him about horses and ranching and honest business. Emily developed into a confident girl who announced at age 10 that she wanted to be a veterinarian, a dream both Eleanor and Isaac supported, despite the raised eyebrows from some more traditional neighbors. Thomas was the family charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble and make everyone laugh. In the summer of 1895, 17 years after their wedding, Eleanor and Isaac took the evening ride they had fallen into the habit of taking whenever they could steal time alone. They rode to the top of the highest hill on their property, where they could see the entire ranch spread below them in the golden evening light. "Do you remember the first time I brought you here?" Isaac asked, helping Eleanor down from her horse. "I was terrified I would fall off," Eleanor admitted. "I had not been on a horse in years, because Constance forbade it." "You were magnificent," Isaac said. "Sat tall in the saddle like you were born to it. I knew then that you belonged here, belonged with me." They sat on the hillside, Eleanor leaning back against Isaac's chest as he wrapped his arms around her. Below them, they could see James working with a young horse in the corral, Emily reading in the shade of the oak tree, and Thomas racing around with one of the ranch dogs. "We did well, did we not?" Eleanor said softly. "We did better than well." We built something extraordinary, Isaac replied. 3 amazing children, a successful ranch, and a love that still makes me grateful every single day. Eleanor twisted around to look at him. At 41, Isaac had silver threading through his dark hair and weathered lines around his eyes, but he was still the handsomest man she had ever seen. I fall more in love with you every year. Is that supposed to happen? I do not know if it is supposed to, but it certainly does for me. Eleanor Matthews, you are my heart. You always will be. They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, the same sun that had witnessed their first kiss in a wagon 17 years earlier. Some loves burn hot and fast, consuming everything in their path before flickering out, but others grow slowly and steadily, deepening with time and weathering storms, becoming strong enough to last forever. Isaac and Eleanor's love was the second kind. The new century arrived with celebrations throughout California. The Matthews family marked the occasion with a party at the ranch, inviting all their friends and neighbors for food, music, and dancing under the stars. Eleanor stood on the porch watching Isaac dance with Emily while James taught Thomas the steps, and she felt so full of contentment she thought she might burst. Mrs. Henderson, now elderly but still sharp as ever, came to stand beside her. I remember the day Isaac bought your freedom at that terrible auction. I went home and told my husband that either he was the biggest fool in California or the smartest man alive. Turned out to be the latter. Eleanor squeezed the older woman's hand. He saved my life that day. I could have ended up anywhere with anyone. Instead, I got a home and a family, and more happiness than I ever dreamed possible. You both got lucky, Mrs. Henderson said. He could have bought your freedom and you could have gone to Sacramento, but you were both brave enough to reach for love, even when it would have been easier to play it safe. That is what makes a good life, Eleanor. Not safety, but courage. As the years continued to unfold, the Matthews family remained strong and close. James eventually married a kind young woman from a neighboring ranch and brought her to live in a house they built on the far corner of the property. Emily did indeed become a veterinarian, one of the first female vets in California, and returned to practice in Winnetka after completing her training. Thomas joined the business side of ranching, proving to have a gift for sales and negotiations that expanded the Matthews operation into new markets. Isaac and Eleanor grew older together, their bodies slowing, but their spirits remaining young. They became grandparents, doting on James's children and eventually Emily's as well. The ranch house that had once felt too big for just the two of them was frequently full of grandchildren, running through the rooms and playing in the yard where their parents had played before them. On a warm afternoon in the spring of 1920, Isaac and Eleanor sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. Isaac was 72 now, his hair completely silver, but his hazel eyes still bright. Eleanor was 61, her dark hair streaked with white, but her smile still as beautiful as it had been the first day he saw her. 42 years, Eleanor mused, holding Isaac's weathered hand in both of hers. 42 years since you bought my freedom. Best money I ever spent, Isaac said, just as he had said countless times over the decades. You gave up your life savings for a stranger. No, I gave up my savings for my future wife. I just did not know it yet. Eleanor laughed, the same bright sound that had filled their home for over 4 decades. You cannot rewrite history to make yourself look prescient. Watch me, Isaac said with the humor that had kept them laughing through hard times. In my version of events, I took one look at you and knew you were the woman I would marry. Therefore, spending my savings to free you was actually a wise investment in our future. A wise investment, Eleanor repeated, shaking her head fondly. You are ridiculous. You love me anyway. I really do, Eleanor agreed. Every single day for 42 years, and I plan to keep on loving you for however many years we have left. Isaac lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. That is all I have ever wanted. Your love, your partnership, your presence in my life. Everything else, the ranch and the success and the family. It is all wonderful, But you are the foundation of it all, Eleanor. You are my heart. They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, watching their grandchildren play in the yard, hearing the sounds of the working ranch around them. The same oak trees that had shaded them on their wedding day still stood tall and strong. The same hills rolled away toward the mountains. The same love that had sparked between a desperate young woman and a compassionate young man still burned bright and true. Eleanor thought back to that terrible day at the auction, standing on the platform believing her life was ending. She remembered the fear and the humiliation and the absolute certainty that nothing good could come from such darkness. How wrong she had been, how beautifully, wonderfully wrong. From that worst moment had come the best life. From that place of no hope had grown a love that sustained her through decades. From that auction block, where she had felt worth nothing, she had built a life of immeasurable value. Isaac must have been thinking along the same lines because he said, I have never regretted it, you know. Not for one single second. Every penny of those savings was worth it to bring you into my life. I have never regretted staying, Eleanor replied. I could have gone to Sacramento, lived a life of ease in society, but I chose you, and it was the best decision I ever made. We chose each other, Isaac corrected, and we kept choosing each other every day through everything. That is what made it work. As the afternoon deepened into evening, their children and grandchildren began arriving for the weekly family dinner that had become tradition. James came with his wife and their 4 children. Emily arrived with her husband and their 2 daughters. Thomas showed up with his wife and their 3 sons. The house filled with noise and laughter and love, 3 generations of the Matthews family gathering together. At dinner, surrounded by the people they had created and raised and loved, Isaac stood and raised his glass. The table quieted, everyone turning to look at him with affectionate attention. I want to make a toast, Isaac said. 42 years ago, I was a young man with some savings and no real direction beyond working with horses. Then I rode into Winnetka and saw a beautiful young woman standing on an auction block, scared but brave, and something in my heart said, her. I spent every penny I had to buy her freedom, and in return she gave me everything. She gave me this family, this life, this incredible journey we have shared. So I want to toast my wife, Eleanor Matthews, the bravest, strongest, most loving woman I have ever known. Thank you for choosing me, darling. Thank you for staying. Thank you for 42 years of happiness. Eleanor stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed her husband while their children and grandchildren applauded. Thank you for seeing me, she whispered against his lips. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. The family dinner continued late into the evening, full of stories and laughter and the comfortable chaos of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. As Eleanor moved through the rooms of her home, helping serve food and settling disputes between grandchildren and soaking in every moment, she felt profound gratitude for the unexpected path her life had taken. She had been sold like property, treated as less than human, stripped of dignity and choice. But she had survived. More than survived, she had thrived, building a life that would have seemed impossible on that terrible auction day. She had found love and family and purpose. She had raised children who were good people making their own marks on the world. She had created something lasting and beautiful, and it had all started with one man's compassion, one act of kindness that had cost him everything he owned, but had given them both everything that mattered. Late that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Eleanor and Isaac lay in their bed with the window open to the spring breeze. They held hands in the darkness, their fingers intertwined as they had been for 42 years. I love you, Eleanor whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Isaac replied. Always have, always will. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, hearts joined, 2 souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had built a love story for the ages. Outside, the California stars shone bright over the ranch, the same stars that had watched over them through decades of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, birth and death, and everything in between. The Matthews Ranch would continue for generations, passed down through children and grandchildren, each one hearing the story of how it all began, how their grandmother was sold at an auction and their grandfather spent his life savings to buy her freedom, how they chose love over practicality and courage over fear, how they proved that even the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures. But that night, as Isaac and Eleanor drifted into peaceful sleep, the details of the future did not matter. What mattered was the present moment, the warmth of their joined hands, the steady rhythm of their breathing, synchronizing as it had done for thousands of nights. What mattered was the knowledge that they had loved well and been loved in return, that they had built something meaningful together, that their story had been worth every challenge they had faced. In the morning, they would wake and tend the ranch and welcome their grandchildren and live another day of their extraordinary, ordinary life. But for now, they simply rested in the comfort of each other's presence, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment still to come. The cowboy had bought her freedom with his savings, but Eleanor had given him something far more valuable in return: her heart, her trust, her partnership, and a lifetime of love that neither of them would ever take for granted. Together, they had transformed a transaction born of desperation into a romance that would inspire their family for generations. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. Not the ranch or the success or even the children and grandchildren, though all of those were precious. The greatest gift was knowing that love could bloom in the most barren soil, that hope could emerge from despair, and that two people who started as strangers could become so deeply intertwined that they could not imagine existence without each other. Isaac and Eleanor Matthews had found their happily ever after in the California hills, under the oak trees, surrounded by horses and family and the life they had built together. It was not the life either of them had expected or planned, but it was exactly the life they were meant to live. Together, always together.